All right. Hey, good morning, everyone joining from the US and uh, those in the UK and Europe, and whatever time zone you're in, wherever you're tuning in. So it's actually my privilege to kick off the Pavilion Palooza as the first speaker over 3 days. Really excited to be here, and we're going to dive into the three strategies to help more marketers become CROs. So hopefully you're tuned in to the correct session, and that's what you are here to see. So a very quick thing about me. Why am I talking about this topic? Well, I've gone through that journey, right? I started 10 years ago at Eventbrite as the head of growth before moving on to becoming a marketing director at a very early stage business called Attest, where I was promoted to then be VP of Revenue and ultimately becoming their Chief Revenue Officer. I've subsequently held that title 3 times now in 3 different high growth businesses, typically ranging from 0 to 25 million in ARR, always VC or high growth tech revenue type business along the way, and built up a wealth of experience. So what I want to do is zero in on some of the strategies that you can use to, if you wanted to go on that journey through to Chief Revenue Officer, because in my opinion, not enough people with a marketing background necessarily hold that position, and so we end up with people with purely sales backgrounds, and I think it would benefit from having more diversity of backgrounds coming into that role. So the 3 things we're going to cover off today, if you're going to move into the CRO position from marketing, the first and probably most important thing is you have to understand the teams you're going to be running, right? You need to get a sense of the psychology and rhythm of sales teams and the deal cycles that you're going to be managing. Then you've got to make sure in the journey towards that you are managing your marketing team to the right revenue metrics. When you're thinking about the planning and the measures of success, there's nothing that's going to shoot quicker than focusing on metrics that are not valued by the organization or seen as high value revenue types of activities. And then the third area is thinking about how you can learn from sales and apply some of those critical sales frameworks back into your ways of working and planning. And so we're going to dive a little bit into the concept of MEDDPICC, but not in the arena of sales, actually how that could be applied into the marketing arena as well. So let's dive in. Now, one of the challenges that I see when speaking to other marketing leaders is they have a perception of what sales is like to work in and lead that I don't think necessarily matches up to reality. Now, I'm not sure, are we able to do messages on here? I'm not sure how much audience participation we have available. I'm going to maybe isn't anything at this point, but if people can message, do send through what you first think about when you think about sales, like, and maybe be a little bit mean, right? You can think about, indulge your slightly darker side when you're thinking about, oh, sales are this or sales are that. And here's a bit of a overview of what many people will talk about when thinking about sales. So sales, they get, oh, great, you can message. Wonderful. Thank you, Klaus. So do add any others in here that I'm missing. But if people are being a little bit mean about sales from the marketing background, they might talk about how they get all the credit, they're overpaid, they can be lazy, they're entitled, they're not very collaborative, they're too needy, they're thin-skinned. Not always the most kind way of thinking about sales teams, but these are all perceptions I've heard very directly leaders at B2B SaaS companies. Here we go. I've got people going now. Pushy, KPI focused, narrow-minded. Where are my leads? Wonderful. Okay, I'm not going to be able to stop people now. Now, that's one way of thinking about sales. The actual reality when you're in a sales team is often that it feels quite like Hunger Games, right? You feel like, and the reality is often that you are one bad quarter from being fired. Hopefully most organizations are not quite that harsh, but you know about it if you're not hitting your number. You've got to be providing 3 to 5x ROI above your comp, or you potentially are on the chopping line. There's nowhere to hide in sales, right? Everything is measured, it's compared, it's judged, it's analyzed. You are rejected and ghosted every day by prospects. You're constantly trying to juggle prospecting and deal management and CRM updates and reporting. There's all this stuff going on in your world. You're trying to manage upwards to your sales line manager, possibly 2 or 3 lines up. You're trying to manage across the organization. And you've got essentially in sales these very high highs, but these very low lows. And in my experience working in both sales and marketing, whilst marketing certainly has a huge number of pressures on them, they tend to be a little bit more even keeled in terms of the emotional roller coaster you get versus sales. And this is so funny. I've seen Heidi, thank you very much. Order takers. The first thing that was on my slide, they're just order takers. Was that really their deal? We should definitely pay less for inbound or they'll become lazy. They close that big deal. We're going to need to actually relook at commissions. The CFO doesn't really want to pay out on that. So these are all constraints or things that sales. And if you, as a marketing leader, want to become a CRO, it's really important you're aware of these types of pressures and often misunderstandings around sales. Some of them are true, but a lot of them are a little bit on the half side. Now, this is a very idealized view of what a sales week looks like. Sadly, if you look at your rep's calendar, it's very unlikely to look quite this busy. But broadly speaking, they're having to constantly juggle these areas of responsibility, right? They're trying to reply to client emails as fast as they can. They should, if they're doing a good job, be prospecting. They're doing meeting prep. They're on discovery calls. They're creating proposals. They're pushing existing deals. They've been haranguing to update the CRM, right? These are all things that the sales team's being asked to do. And that's going to fluctuate a little bit over this sales cadence, but roughly depending on whether you're managing, these are the kind of key milestones that many sales reps are going to be working towards. So one of the challenges that you have with marketing is, often marketing will start to plan out their campaigns for the following quarter, maybe a month in advance, and they want to talk to the sales team, right? They want to say, hey, we'd love to get your feedback. Can we brainstorm? What is it that you're missing? But it happens to come just around this period, 2 or 3 weeks before they're closing their quarter, when they're like, oh, all I need to do is hit my number. I don't have time for this. I can't spare an hour to do this brainstorming session. And so a classic mismatch is the different cadences between sales and marketing. And so if marketing are going to sales towards the end of a quarter saying, hey, can we help you? They're often getting short thrift because they don't have the time. And then marketing view sales as uncollaborative or unhelpful. And of course, one of the challenges is because sales haven't engaged, they then next quarter they need pipeline, and then they seem very reactive back to marketing saying, hey, where are our leads? We need more leads, because they're slightly panicking, they don't have enough to hit their number. So it's really important as a marketer wanting to move into the CRO position to just understand these nuances, because you have to be able to manage the marketing team slightly differently, to a different lockstep cadence than you would manage the sales team. And of course, as a CRO, I'm focusing very much on sales and marketing here. You would also need to be able to lead RevOps and CS, but there's only 20 minutes, so I'm zeroing in on sales here. Now, in terms of the KPIs and metrics, I do think not enough sales teams probably look at sales velocity, but really they should be looking at these key areas. So how many opportunities are they creating on a weekly, monthly basis? What is the average deal value of those opportunities? What is their win rate? And then if you divide that by the length of the sales cycle, or the daily run rate, effectively your sales velocity metric, and you can see what this looks like in a hypothetical situation. And sales teams have really been measured on activities, things like response rates to their outreach, of course their attainment rates, how close are they to getting to quota, and also even now, what is the gross margin of their contribution to the business? Are they doing good deals or bad deals? So these are the types of metrics that your sales leader, your peer over as the VP of sales, or potentially today's CRO, they're going to be thinking a lot about these and how they run through the organization down to an individual sales rep's level. Now, what's really important is not just the metrics, but to consider how these metrics align with sales compensation and how those things then drive the behavior of a sales team. And I think this gets missed routinely. So, for example, in many organizations, get paid if an SQL, if they are able to generate a sales qualified lead. Now, often that sales qualified lead, the criteria sits outside of their control. It's down to an AE to determine whether that is a sales qualified lead. So if an AE rejects it, the SDR, having spent potentially weeks and weeks of chasing up, emailing, calling, setting the meeting, reminding people of the meeting, possibly even jumping on the meeting, they don't get the credit, right? So they've lost all of that time. Now, that means an SDR is often only going to pass over a lead that they really, really believe is going to be an SQL. So if they sniff an MQL being handed to them, or a lead that probably isn't ICP, that they don't think their AE is going to accept, they won't work it. And that is why so many SLAs between sales and marketing don't get hit, because marketing is saying, hey, we generated all these leads, we have all these MQLs. The SDRs see, why won't they touch it? But the SDRs often are being quite smart. They're assessing ahead of time what's going to become an SQL, what's worth their time, and they don't work anything that won't, because they're not compensated on it. Ditto on the sales side of things. If they don't think it's going to close this period, quite often they will have to deprioritize it. There is only so many hours in the day. So if, again, as a marketer, you're chasing up the salesperson to close this deal because you can see that marketing's contributed to the pipeline, if they don't see it's going to quite frankly help them hit quota, often it's a very hard conversation to have. Now, similarly, right company, wrong persona. So potentially you give someone a really amazing looking enterprise type of lead, but it's it's a student, or it's the secretary, or it's someone that's quite frankly not a decision maker. The sales rep might say, oh, thank you, but it's going to the bottom of the pile because they can see this is going to be a little, or they're talking to a tire kicker, which can infuriate marketing, right? Because you're creating all these ICP leads, but if you don't have the decision maker on top of it, sales just won't give it the attention that you wish they would, because they can see it's not going to contribute to their bottom line anytime soon. Now, if they're going to miss their cliff, cliff is this idea, slightly more popular in the US than in the UK, that if you don't hit 70%, 75%, 80% of your quota, depends where it's set, then you get paid nothing, no commission, no bonus at all. So if a sales team does have a cliff, I generally think they're a bad idea for this reason. They will down tools, because everything they're going to do towards trying to move the number, if they don't think they're going to get to the cliff, is all going to be wasted effort. And they'll wait until the next period, the next month, the next quarter. So again, if you're handing leads, if you're providing sales enablement materials, if you're doing stuff for the sales team, and you didn't realize that they're so far behind that they're on a cliff and they're going to miss it, again, you might think they're being truculent and difficult. Maybe you'd argue they still are, but they're just being smart about how they manage their time, and they're not going to work on that. And then finally, hitting quota with a poor accelerator or capped compensation, again, they're going to push a deal forward, right? They're going to sandbag it and they're going to move it into the next period when they actually get paid properly on it. So there's a lot of disincentives in sales compensation that makes it very hard for marketing to work with them, but marketing often aren't aware of them. So it's really important, if you want to move into being a CRO position and you think, why is this not resonating? Why are the sales team not working on this? Why is something that seems a reasonable request not being reasonably responded to? Take a look under the hood and dive into the sales compensation structure if you're able to, and that might offer a lot of cues into why these things aren't working properly. Now, going back to the metrics that marketing need to care about, revenue contribution clearly is number one, right? And I know many marketing teams will push back and they'll say, oh, well, we're not in charge, we are not responsible or accountable for revenue because we can't close the deal for sales, right? We can only go so far and then we need to hand it over. But I think those times are starting to erode. And if you want to be a marketing leader who does ultimately want to move into a CRO position, you have to align your team around how you are going to drive revenue as a core metric and how you can track that. Now, as you've seen from the previous slide, quality. It's all about quality versus quantity when it comes to aligning marketing to sales. Of course, if you're providing great quality leads, amazing MQLs that convert on an ongoing basis, people asking you for more. That's a great position to be in, but you've got to start with quality and then try and build on the quantity side of things. Do not go the other way around. As soon as you start reporting on quantitative metrics, like here's the number of leads, but the conversion rate's off, actually that's just introducing massive inefficiency into the organization. And you're actually going to teach the sales team not to work the leads you're providing because they're not converting. So you've got to focus first and foremost on quality over quantity. Now, I think an underrated metric or area that marketing needs to focus on is building brand awareness. I know it's hard to get budget for this. It kind of feels fuzzy. But the thing that I would focus on is when you're speaking to the sales organization, how many times when they pick up the phone, either doing cold outreach or on their first discovery calls, does the company already know who you are and have a reasonable perception of what you do? Right now, that should be a metric that you track, because that makes salespeople really, really happy, right? If they pick up the phone and or they jump on a discovery call, and the first thing they don't have to do is spend 5 minutes explaining what the hell you do and why you're different to your competitors. If that's been done for you by marketing, you're in a great place, right? So that is one of the key metrics I would look at and how to measure it. And then finally, you also want to be focusing quite a lot on providing the credibility needed for the sales team to win deals. So the case studies, the enablement, the battle cards, and so on. And that is, again, an underrated use of marketing resources, in my opinion. And should you go on to be the CRO, you'll be very grateful that you put the time and effort into these different assets. Now, finally, just quickly talking through a critical framework. So we won't quite have time to call out if you understand or know what MEDDPICC stands for. But actually, many marketers don't, and it's as a marketing leader, right? So many sales teams who are selling mid-market to enterprise deals, they are living and dying by this framework, right? All of their deal progression is their pipeline quality is being judged by MEDDPICC. They're being coached to MEDDPICC. Their coaching sessions with their line manager is being done around MEDDPICC. Brainstorms around how to close deals are often orientated around MEDDPICC. So if you in the marketing team don't even know what it stands for, let alone how it's applied, you're not in a great place to be able to work shoulder to shoulder with the sales organization, because this is such an important part of it. So you can see here the key areas. Again, I won't have time to run through it all, but it's really important you familiarize yourself with MEDDPICC and how the sales team is using it. And if they don't use MEDDPICC, understand what framework that they do use. It could be BANT, it could be SPICED, it could be SPIN. These are all very popular frameworks that are still today. And then once you understand what the framework is, you can start to apply it to your thinking in marketing, to your campaign planning. And you can say, do we have enough on our website? Or do we have enough going out across our LinkedIn account? Or do we have enough case studies that really speak to our buyers or our prospects' key metrics that they care about? Do we really understand what their decision criteria are? And are they covered in these different areas? Are we really doing a great job of implicating the pain, using the prospect's own words and language in order to help the sales team, so that when they are on a call, that you're already speaking the shared language, right? And the prospect already has a sense of these different areas that go into helping close a deal. Why are you different to your competition? Do you actually think about your ICP broken down as what materials does an economic buyer need to do that's different to a champion? Okay, there are a few different key areas for you to think of, and conscious time, I'll keep pushing on. Now, the last thing on cadence and aligning marketing to sales is thinking about where marketing stops and sales starts. And of course, that is an incorrect way of thinking about it. There is no start and stop with sales and marketing. There isn't this basic linear funnel, right? It is a circular buyer journey, and marketing can align to sales across all these different stages of awareness with different types of activities. So brand and communications really helps drive awareness, and that can be integrated very nicely with social selling. For sales, SDRs might be trying to drum up outbound and inbound interest to qualify it. That aligns very nicely with your demand gen team. AEs often need a ton of sales enablement and support, which fits great with product marketing. Going into activation, you've got life cycle marketing, which aligns very nicely with CMs and AMs. So make sure you're aligning the sales marketing cadence together in lockstep. Make sure you're joining key meetings. And just to call out this final bullet point, I highly, highly urge anyone in marketing aspiring to go into the CRO role to be listening to at least 4 calls a month from discovery and demo calls, and ideally get all of your team to do it as well. That's the best possible way to really understand about your prospects' language. Go into every meeting with sales with a collaboration checklist. What do you need to learn from sales, and what do you need to convey to them, and how would you frame it differently now you have an understanding of their cadence and their psychology? So rapid fire, 20 minutes, doesn't take long to run through everything, but key outcomes from today are to really understand sales. Imagine you're running today and build that empathy and understanding of how it's run, from a sales rep's perspective right up to sales leader. Make sure you lock your marketing operating cadence to the sales team so that they're not in parallel, they actually overlap at the right points in time. Align marketing to the most impactful metrics and areas that matter, and then use sales frameworks to help guide campaign planning. It's going to make everything a lot smoother. Here's a few different resources for those marketers who want to get clued up on sales. And with that, I hope this was useful and we were able to drive more marketers into the CRO role.